All right, friends, welcome to podcast number 2, the very end of the bridge, not the end of the bridge, the end of this bridge and the beginning of many others. We are going to be talking today about Arthur Frank's The Wounded Storyteller and embodied storytelling. I know that Susan was working on getting the reading done. Helen, this is probably old reading for you. Did you have a chance to refresh it all?
Yes.
Fantastic. So, do either of you guys want to talk a little bit about what you've learned about monadic or dyadic bodies? And if you prefer not to answer, no worries. But is there anything that you learned about monadic or dyadic bodies
I
that you
thought it
find
was a
interesting?
shame that they had to choose such off-putting names.
Yes. Talk about obnoxious names. Yeah.
I mean, basically what they're saying is that either you're kind of self-sufficient to the point of isolation, or you're open to communing and relating with other people.
Mhm.
But monadic and dyadic are terms that I find just so stilted and so out of our everyday parlance as to be alien. But
100%. I agree with you.
that's an aside. That's
I agree with
academic
you.
speak.
Yeah, and that's an important point because it situates things in a binary, and binary logic is always questionable. But I think that Arthur Frank is using these as a continuum. On one, as you phrased it beautifully, on one end of a continuum, you have somebody who's so isolated. They're either self-sufficient or, in some types of bodies, even masochistic. But they're separated. They see themselves as separated from the world. Whereas in the dyadic body, they see themselves as for others, sharing themselves out. And I think there's a lot of space to cover in the middle. As Arthur Frank says, these are stories, right? These aren't even ideals, they're narratives that we tell ourselves, and they can shift in any moment and any given illness experience. You can toggle between not just these binaries, but these 4 what he calls ideal types of bodies, which, let me tell you, I bristle against as well, because anything that tries to put a category, like as if there are only 4 types of ways of dealing with illness, automatically makes me a little itchy. But it is an interesting way to think about the narratives that we start telling ourselves around illness and what it allows us or limits us in our behavior, in our perspectives. So I agree with you. I think that binary way of thinking is very itchy, and I'm glad that you brought that up. As far as dyadic body goes, what dyadic bodies go, what interested you guys there?
As we both reach for our notes.
Yeah.
Helen, do you want to jump in? I don't mean to.
Yeah, no. I was actually, I was nodding away. I think that initial sort of you're either one or the other. In my mind, I was like, well, I'm both. And so then I think, Julia, when you were sort of saying almost like that spectrum across, I was going, well, yes. And, there's that compartmentalizing, but in a way that's just defining that moment in time that you're connected with that type. And you can kind of meet people and you go, yeah, they are more time in that section than the other, sort of a thing. And I think that's sort of how I processed it in my mind, to not go, get all bristly. But it was this, there are different sort of stories that you hear, and there's almost, I suppose, that isolated time and connected, just in that sort of side of things a little bit.
Yeah, you're right.
So I'm pretty much just agreeing with everything you just said.
I think you said it brilliantly, Helen. Like, even in a single body, in a single moment, we can be monadic and dyadic at once. We can have multiple stories going on in our head, right? And I think it's important to notice that it's not one or the other. but it is a way of thinking about how we can be and be ill, or how our patients can be in their illness. So just a little breakdown of dyadic bodies and monadic bodies. The monadic body is for itself, and I think you put it really nicely, Susan, that sometimes that's just self-sufficiency, and that sometimes that's a necessary thing to isolate, right? But I think Arthur Frank points out something really interesting when it comes to the way our healthcare system is designed, or most healthcare systems, I would say, are designed to promote that kind of isolation, that monadic body. Just look at, hospital rooms. Earlier, Kim mentioned, the single bed that nobody else can fit into. And how many times have you had a loved one in the hospital you just wanted to snuggle up next to? Now they're experimenting, actually, especially in maternity wards, she tells us, with creating a double bed so that new parents can rest together. But if you think of all the other ways that hospitals are segregated from the community, siloed out, it's very, the very notion of illness, there's a kind of sequestering connotation in mind, when probably a lot of people, at least the people who are chronically ill, what they really need is community and support and family. So I think it's really interesting to notice how our systems are designed to promote that monadic body. On the other hand, we have the dyadic body, which is not so much an ideal as it is an action. It's a choice. And Frank calls it an ethical choice. And this ethical choice is to place oneself in relationship with others, to be for others. So this ethical choice, it actually reminds me a lot of what we were talking about last class with Tracy Chapman. I think that in the dyadic body, in this community, it's not necessarily a community that just shares itself out and gives until you have nothing left. It's a community that sees itself on an equal playing field, that can give and take in equal measure. So this lived reality, not a conceptual ideal, is a choice. And he goes on to talk about the different ideal typical bodies. I don't want you guys to worry about getting lost in the mud of what is a disciplining body and what is a mirroring body, although it's very interesting. I want you guys to focus on the communicative body. So if you happen to have this printed out or on your screen, if you go to page, there we go, page 49. Frank talks about the communicative body as a contingent body, one that is fully associated with itself, and in particular, its mortality, its frailty, its fragility. We were talking a little bit about this in spaceship ethics, where somebody with spaceship ethics does not recognize their own fallibility or frailty, or the fact that one day they too will be in a hospital bed. And so Frank and others argue that it's precisely our shared suffering, our shared ability to suffer, that puts us in that ethical stance to be for others who suffer as well. Then on page 50, he says that the communicative body emphasizes suffering as life's inevitable contingency, and on service as a productive desire to join with other bodies to express the full ethical ideal of the communicative body. So it's the contingency of the body itself that is the beginning of ethics, which I think is profound, that it's in our very weakness that we discover ethics. That was all I wanted you guys to take away from that, but I'm sure there's a lot more to be taken away here. Is there anything else you guys would like to discuss about the introductory reading before we put a pin in it and then talk about these types of bodies in K Tempest?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit offshoot, but it just kind of reminded me of something that has come up in a previous course, with the whole you mentioned about the beds and the double beds, and I was thinking about the rooms on the ward where I was a few years ago, where they had the two single beds, so it's a shared room, and I was very conscious of giving the person their personal space rather than just, you know, losing all that connection to privacy. And I was thinking about that with the with this and going, you know, does that isolate more rather than, you know, is it's kind of like that, is it beneficial or not? You know, with that whole thing of, okay, they're away from home and respecting their space, and you know, that was in mindset, but then actually maybe that connection to the other person or to us as part of their story is actually important. And I guess, you know, thinking about it, because, you know, you think about some people, they make a best friend with the person that's in the bed next to them. And you sort of go, oh, that is quite a, you can't assume anything really. And it's
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Helen.
no, that's all right. I'm kind of mumbling.
I just, to make sure that I'm understanding you correctly, because this is a really interesting idea, but I'm not sure this is what you meant to say. Are you saying that in hospital, when you're sharing a room with a stranger, and in your effort to give them privacy and space when they're ill and vulnerable and away from home, that you isolate them and yourself even more by trying so hard to give them privacy? It's almost like at the fourth wall. You're not going to acknowledge that there is somebody actually just a few feet away from you. Is that what you mean?
It's more as in my professional. So coming in as a physio, rather than me sharing the room, what I would do is identify the space around their bed as theirs and ask permission to enter, as I would, you know, coming into their home. I would knock on their door. I would, you know, so I will ask permission to go into the hospital. You know, if I'm looking for something, you know, I will identify things like furniture in their space as theirs. You know, it was more that side of things. But is that then, you know, there's that whole narrative, well, there isn't, you know, it isn't their home, it is in a hospital. And, you know, by doing that, there is an element that I am isolating them from the community that's the hospital space that they're in. I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's as strong as that, but it's those little, you know, subtle undertones that I've now just thought about another layer of.
Of course, the answer is going to be that it's highly individual.
Absolutely.
How people respond. Or perhaps that in recognizing their space as their private space, to them, you're only emphasizing that they're not in their own private space. It's kind of like, it reminds me, once I was at the doctor and I was getting changed into the gown, and he walked into the room before I was done, and he couldn't have seen anything. And anyway, who cares, because he's a doctor. But he realized I wasn't completely done and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and he immediately shut the door. And that act of making a big deal out of it made me more self-conscious than if he had just slipped into the room discreetly and you know, and waited the 10 extra seconds it would have taken me to finish doing up my gown or whatever it was. It's something that I've thought a lot about, because I'm sure he thought that he was doing the right thing and being completely respectful. And to me, it just seemed to emphasize something else. And the doctor too, you know, who's going to examine me. So there's not actually anything that I'm hiding from him.
But I guess it's that different space, isn't it? There's the undressing preparation space, and then there's the examining, and you're in two different zones in that kind of,
or in the relationship. You're in two different zones in the relationship.
Yeah. That's very important too. You know, and for me, this is really highlighting something that Helen said earlier about asking permission and asking, I mean, it's about choice, right? And a higher level of communication around needs, because needs are so dynamic and can change in any given minute, and giving somebody permission just to say what they need and to have that meta level conversation and giving them that empowered choice, even if it's something as small as, would you like me to leave the room now so that you can get dressed? Is it okay if I'm here? You know, what, just having that conversation, I think, is really important. And Helen, you said that you ask them, if you can enter their space. And all of this, I think, really resonates with Frank's idea of choice as a kind of agency. In illness narratives, I think a lot of these types of bodies that he's describing are we unconsciously tell ourselves these stories, or we don't even know their stories. They just seem like realities thrust upon us. And reading this makes me realize that we do have a little more choice, even in something as terrifying as terminal illness. We have a choice on how we relate to others. And that begins with communication. That begins with shared story. So I hope I didn't take that too far astray, but I just felt it really resonated with what Frank was saying about agency, how ethics is about agency. So is it okay if we move on to Kay Tempest? Any other last thoughts? Wonderful. So let's jump in to, we're going to do this together. We're going to watch Kay Tempest's performance together. Just so you guys are aware, and I will probably slip up in this video call and I'll correct myself immediately. Kay Tempest uses they, them, their pronouns. So if you find yourself making a mistake, just correct yourself and move on really quickly too, and we'll try to honor their preferences as much as we can. And I'm going to turn on their video now, and we're going to be watching for Kay's embodiment of their story, how they use their hands, their gestures, their looks, their breath, their beingness to communicate their narrative. So as you watch, keep your eyes on Kay, but make some mental notes about what you're seeing. I'm going to share my screen now. I'll put us over here. So it's kind of like we're the audience she's going to be looking at. Oh, the audience they're going to be looking at.
I can smell the thunder coming. I can smell the rain. Look, you're the only one I ever knew whose eyes could hold the flame without burning like the others burn. She told me hell's to blame, and I told her hell's a choice we make, and Blake would tell the same. If all deities reside within, how come I feel that presence above? The love that unplugs the heart and starts the flood again within me, drowning out the badness that I harbor. When my goodness battens down the hatches and holds onto a partner, she's saying storms coming, of course it is. It always is on nights like this. The tower blocks are murmuring, and I can sense a turning wind, and I glimpse this man who isn't there, and I know that glitch for all it's worth, because I pass out full of madness. And I wake up drenched in thirst, like, give me whiskey, give me beers to glug, just let me lose this fear, and I'll love anyone who's near enough to look in slightly like you. All I'm trying to say, today's like all them other days. And all I'm trying to do is mark it down and make it true, to make it count for something, because I know nothing is eternal and nothing means a thing, and nobody believes nothing. That's why we live in all this sin, and we mistake it for normality, for something to attain. My descent sets me apart, but today I smell that rain come to wash away these masks, the marks embedded on our weary hearts, and this is merely metaphor. But metaphor is flexing jaw and getting ready for the fight is come to fight with the surface world. But we have lost our purpose, hurled into a furnace where the burn is near celestial. Detestable outsider, yes, my chest is full of cytogen and lightning, and my eyes will dim, but the rhymes will sing in times to come. Since I begun, my head's been filled with end, because these people wear too many faces. But I swear the truth will strike again. See, I wake up in the end times, curled up in the wreckage, thinking life will happen, whether you dismiss it or expect it. So look into my eyes, you'll see your own eyes reflected. I'm crying oceans into paragraphs, while behind our backs our shadows laugh. We wake up in the end times, curled up in the wreckage, saying life's gonna happen, whether you dismiss it or expect it. So let me look into your eyes and see my own eyes reflected. I'm crying oceans into paragraphs, Because behind our backs, our shadows laugh. Look, when I'm telling rhymes, I shut my eyes because it helps me see stuff. These words, they're like the leaves in the bottom of the gypsy's teacup. If you look at them right, you might see the future in them. See, I always knew that we were here for more than wash the dishes, do the cooking. See, I'm here to speak for everyone that never got a look in. You know, the ones who ain't good looking, the ones who hate the crooked, wicked nature of the system. For everyone who knows fucking just because we can't see the bars don't mean we aren't imprisoned. I believe every soul is born blessed with true wisdom and that life is about getting back what was given before life. How come we are all in these disguises hidden? How come we sleep through life and live in dreams? Is it because we can't tell the difference now? All my life, people looked at me without suspicion. I'm like, yo, I got to be what I got to be. I'm the victim of my own condition. And the meaning is the same no matter which language speaks it. The new paradigm begins as soon as you're ready to perceive it. And that's the real talk. These are whirlpool words you can drown in. But I'm so desperate for beauty, I'll turn scaffolding to mountains. I'll turn traffic into breakers. While this illusion overtakes us, I'm saying we need to learn to bite the hand that bullies and berates us. Because we're going to wake up in the end times. We're going to be curled up in the wreckage thinking, yeah, life's going to happen, whether we dismiss it or expect it. So let me look into your eyes and see my own eyes reflected. I'm crying oceans into paragraphs. Because behind our backs, our shadows laugh.
What do you guys think?
That was my third time watching that video. This is just one thought of many. And I noticed this the first time I watched it, I wondered if she was seeing impaired. She seems unseeing. And I wondered if she was deliberately closing her eyes because she's speaking from such a deep place within. Or is she actually physically blind or seeing impaired, visually impaired, and so her eyes they seem kind of half closed, as though she's not taking in visual stimuli.
So they have a line about this.
Yeah, that comes up. I was exactly the same. And
yeah.
When they talk about, I close my eyes to see the lines, or it's something. There is a reference to they come alive. They see the lines with her eyes closed. Because when they talk about let me look into your eyes to see my own eyes reflected, my instant thought was open your eyes so I can see your eyes. It was quite, and then there is the other line about I close my eyes so I can see the words, and I didn't know if it was the angle of the camera, because when it did come round, their eyes were more open, and my initial thing was, if you're talking to me, open your eyes. It's something that I've had since a child. When I had a friend that closed their eyes when they were talking, and it used to really annoy me, and so I had that initial annoyance when I first watched it, and I've watched it a few times as well, and it's it's that balance between, I don't know if they open their eyes and close their eyes in between just because of the angle of the camera, but I know there's two references to eyes in there.
So I'm cheating. I printed the lyrics. So they say, when I'm telling rhymes, I shut my eyes because it helps me see stuff. But then they go on to say, these words, they're like the leaves in the bottom of the gypsy's teacup. If you look at them right, you might see the future in them. And you also point out, there are other lines about eyes, look into my eyes, see your eyes reflected, and the reverse happens too. So I do think it's interesting to think about seeing impaired, even on a figurative level, as a kind of owning of that blind spot of blindness, and trying to fill the gap with others, trying to see through others' eyes, through others' perspectives, who you are. It's a very Lacanian idea. I know you probably read a little bit about Lacan in this introductory reading, who's a philosopher, who says, and Judith Butler talks about this too, I know you've read, Helen, that we all have a lack, we all have a gap, right? And you can literally talk about it as, the sociocultural context in which we're born that we don't really see because we're so in it, we're so immersed in it, we become kind of blind to it. And we have to inform each other about that gap, that blind spot, by communicating, by sharing stories, by learning, just as we've learned on the boards, things that we didn't even see in our own writing that we're like, wow, that is true. Maybe I was thinking that on some unconscious level. We fill each other in. So I see that kind of, I don't know, emphasis on sight in a figurative way as well. I don't know if Kay has any vision problems, but it's interesting to think about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't even go down that line.
Yeah,
I think I've seen them perform before. Maybe, I don't know. It's made me question why, because now you said it, Susan. I'm going, oh, of course, I didn't even, consider that. Which makes me go, oh, why didn't I?
I'm thinking too about that line. It's the line we land on, but it's repeated, because behind our backs, our shadows laugh, right? Like the things that are unseen that we cast, that we don't know that we're casting, right? So if there is medicine in here, what is it? How do you deal with those shadows laughing behind you? Can you think of any lines that call to you as a kind of, I don't know, if not solution, at least an answer to that laughter of the shadows?
I'd have to listen to it again, I think.
I would as well, and I didn't print out lyrics, but I think the
No.
line that you've both mentioned, which stood out to me as well when I was listening to them recite, was, in your eyes, my eyes are reflected. Yeah. Or is it, in my eyes, your eyes are reflected? I'm not quite sure.
They do,
but
I think they do both.
Both?
Yeah.
Which is even more interesting, right? So
yeah.
This is a fantastic discussion just around sight. And as I'm looking now, there's a lot of lines here. And my eyes will dim, but the rhymes will sing in times to come. Like there's a lot of imagery around light and dark, seen and unseen. And I agree with you. There's a kind of hope. Even as our own shadows are laughing behind us, we look for each other in each other's eyes. Something really powerful about that.
And that, Julia, as you said, we all have a lack, and we're born into this cultural context that we're so immersed in we can't see. We're not aware of our own lack often. And it takes others to point it out to us. So we can't see the shadow that we are casting.
Yeah.
And it takes other people to see it, to show that to us. Exactly. By the way, if I can go back just a few minutes to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, when we were talking about the maiadic and the dyadic, Helen, there was something you said that made me think of light, about how light can be both a particle and a wave at the same time. And I wanted to mention it, but we kind of moved on. And I know that we were saying nothing should be binary because that is so restrictive. But here we are again talking about eyes and seeing and light and shadows. And I was reminded again of that I had thought about light before and the possibility of being multiple things at the same time.
Yeah, now that you're mentioning it, I'm kind of thinking about where light shows up here. Because so much of this is end times and fire and destruction, but there's also a source of light in the beginning. Look, you're the only one I ever knew whose eyes could hold the flame without burning like the others burnt. She told me hell's to blame, and I told her hell's a choice we make.
The ethical choice.
That's right, right? The story that we're telling. But also, I think it's really cool that the light, this flame, it's I see them talking as a lover, to a lover, to somebody or a dear friend or somebody they hold close. And this person is someone who can handle the fire in ways that others can't, can hold maybe Kay's fire, maybe the world's fire in ways that others can't. And I think it comes back to this perspective that hell's a choice we make, that this friend or lover offers her, that it enables her to hold the fire.
And it's interesting how that kind of interweaves with that whole, like you saying, the flames of passion, almost, in that, you know, we use that, and then it's this flame that you know this person can hold is not destructive. So flames don't have to be destructive. Like when you think about the farmers, when they do their burn, it's actually to nourish the soil. You know, you've got these kind of sitting either side by side, very opposite sort of images of fire and flames, and you know, as you say, it's end time destruction or passion or nourishing, you know, the earth.
And I'm sorry, you're just lighting fires in my own brain.
Yeah.
So it reminds me that rain works in that same ironic way, like storms coming, storms brewing. But then she says, but now I can smell that rain, right? Like it has both valences. It's the choice you make, right? Like, do you remember that line where she says, I can smell that rain, like it's a good thing, like it's something it's something they can't wait for, right? So I love that you guys are honing in on these the two different ways of looking at these narratives, and how choice and agency kind of comes in to determine how they're told. So, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say something else. So if you had something else, go ahead, Julia.
I know I don't want to take you guys over time, so I was going to move on to talk about her embodied performance, but we can keep close reading, please. This is my joy. Let it keep coming.
No, I was going to move on to the embodied reading as well. And I was
great.
just going to say that one of the first things that struck me as I was thinking about the question, how does she embody her story, is that her body seems so agitated. She's almost jiggling or bouncing a little bit.
Yeah. What else did you notice? Jiggling, bouncing, what else?
Well, she gesticulates a lot very appropriately. So when she's talking about your eyes versus my eyes, sorry, I keep saying she. When they're talking about your eyes or my eyes, or there's another line they say that is something about the other. So there's, or outside, I think it is, and they gesticulate away from themselves. So there's appropriate body language to help communicate or bolster or illustrate or demonstrate the words. But that's kind of obvious. I didn't notice anything that was especially more subtle than that in how they told their story. That's a great place to start. So I like the gesticulations and the bouncing and the jiggling. What does this reveal about the kind of story they're trying to tell?
It's interesting when you use the word agitated, because it made me question how I saw her, and because I saw the jiggling as almost an excitement and listen, this is important, you know, it's this passion almost for, you know, and the more hand gestures and, you know, the intonation of their voice changes. It's so I'm kind of going a little bit off. But the one thing that I really noticed when they talked about, I close my eyes to see the rhymes or something, there is a softening and almost a side talk to that part, as though I did question whether it's part of the poem or not, because it was there was a almost turn to the side and a different tone in their voice. But this, you know, is agitation, I then question, is agitation a negative or a positive, or is it both? But it was you know, it was like, listen to me. It's, you know, the whole performance is very much, I am saying something important, listen. I want you to hear this. I want you to, you know, it's that almost a burning drive to get this message, is my take on how, you know, how she
What does the
moves.
word agitated mean to you, Helen? What
Well,
does
this
you
is,
think
yeah, this is what I started twirling in my head, because to me, I took agitated is worried, or but if you think of agitate as in just to stir up, it doesn't necessarily have to be worried. Like it was a little bit of self-reflection on where I go with that word initially, which is quite interesting.
Stir up is such a lovely definition, because if I had to speculate about this narrator's agenda, it would be to stir us up. It would be to shake the dust. It would be to create a sense of urgency in us. And I think whether we see it as agitation or enthusiasm, it lands in us as that urgency, and that a pleading urgency to listen, as you said, Helen, to just to listen. So I think that's an excellent observation. And I also think that the bouncing, for me, it was very rhythmic. Like I found myself bouncing with them, you know, in a way that kind of made me feel like my body and their was beginning to mirror their body. Why do you think that's important, or what does that reveal about this speaker?
it reveals an ability to connect, because subconsciously, when we are in sync with somebody, we start to mirror their body language and their facial expressions and their
Nice.
emotional state, and we're often not even aware of it.
Nice.
When you think about that entrainment with the rhythm, and that, you know, we're then connecting, and whether it's a heartbeat, whether it's our breath, you know, whatever bodily function that we're kind of, or even if it's just, as you say, we mirroring that.
Yes.
Does that then help the words become embodied in us? You know, do we then connect more?
That's beautiful. I was very aware when they were speaking of their accent, and that how there were some rhymes that worked beautifully in their accent that wouldn't work as beautifully in my accent. And then, of course, as you said, the rhythm, because they created those words, and so they speak them exactly as they want them to. And if I had read the poem, it would not have meant nearly the same thing to me as it did listening and seeing it.
100%. And now you're making me realize that that's the power of spoken poetry, right? Like there's something so deliciously embodied about it. You can't do away with the body and it make any sense. And it makes it very unique to the speaker. You know, as I'm listening to that accent, which I consider a kind of, this is not an accent that is anything other than what it is. It's not trying to be anything else. You know, like it just smacks of authenticity, you know, and that matters in the meanings of the poem as well. You know, shaking the masks, shaking the faces that you wear. You know, what do they say? You know, I have my own condition and I have to be it. You know, so in all of these ways, the voice, the movement, the gestures, they all work together to create this very particular meaning. I love it. I have chills. Thank you guys for this awesome close read. So just so we have enough time, is it okay if we move on to Wasted, or do you have any last thoughts on End Times? Okay. Are you guys ready for our performance? All right. We are going to talk about Wasted. We're going to practice. Well, before we jump in to the play itself, we've talked about ways that the body can be used to tell a story. Let's talk a little bit about ways the body can be used to listen to a story in a way that takes us out of our head, out of the reading poems on a page and hearing it in our hearts, hearing it in our goosebumps, hearing it in our bellies or wherever in our bodies are really just feeling this. How do we do that? How do we cultivate that practice in a healthcare setting?
I think first of all is the context, and creating a space that feels safe, and that usually means a cozy place. For me as a massage therapist, I think that being in a small room one-on-one for a prolonged period of time, and of course the lights are dimmed and there's soft music playing and people are usually lying down, and they're warm and they're cozy and there's a soft blanket over them. But it's not just that, it's the duration of time that allows them to let their guard down. And that doesn't happen instantaneously.
Good point.
So those contextual factors allow them to let their guard down. Sorry, Julia, what was the phrase that you used? A phrase particularly, how we embody other people's stories. Was that it?
Yeah. How do we use our bodies to listen? And I think as a massage therapist, you're great at this already, because most of what we're doing is listening with our hands, and our voices sometimes come into the mix, but I think, manual therapists tend to do a lot of that embodied listening anyway. But you've already mentioned a great, the duration of time, just being with somebody for a duration of time and letting them get comfortable, cultivating an environment, an atmosphere that allows them to know that they're safe and that you are paying attention. I think these are great points. What other ways can we listen with our
Well,
bodies?
going back to shutting the eyes.
Yeah.
Often when I massage, I shut my eyes because I can feel better. I can listen better.
Nice.
And so when we shut out one sense, and our eyes, I think for most of us, tend to be a more dominant sense.
Mm-hmm.
When we shut that out, it allows the others to expand.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, when I was a teenager and I was first learning to kayak, and it was in a sort of semi-racing kayak, extremely unstable. It wasn't one of these cottage kayaks. And I would shut my eyes and my balance became so much better, I think, because I was more in my body and feeling the balance of the boat on the water. And so I think that's how we listen with our bodies as well.
I love it. Great point. Any other ideas?
I think in a sort of almost obvious sort of way, just the connection we make when we're talking to someone, just in that, if how we're sitting, how we're using our body literally in the conversation between us. I was thinking about I'll often kind of open up the idea that my hands are having a conversation with the brain and the neural tissue. So I actually bring that in, and I will, I often use my hands to get people to connect with their physical sensation, and a little bit in a distraction, but also improving that brain body somatosensory sort of input, and going, can you feel my hands? What do they feel like? So I'm bringing in the physical and the dialogue as though they're one, really.
I love it. How very Diane Jacobs of you, Helen. I love it.
Yeah, I do like her.
And I really like how all of these ideas, this is totally not planned at all, but a lot of these ideas are the themes of our week, of our weeks over the 9-week duration of time: temporality, cultivating a good environment, place, shutting eyes, feeling, balance, that's perspective, and bias, and connection really is where we are here in the Embodied Storyteller. So I think it's interesting that we're touching on a lot of the themes that we've been mulling over the last 9 weeks together. I think all of these are excellent ideas. So if we were in a larger group, I would invite half of the group to practice these embodied listening techniques as they listen to the other half of the group perform them and use their bodies to tell the story. But since it's us three, we will be all performing. And but just like we were talking about with the dyadic and monadic body, we can be two things at once. So as we're performing, we'll also be listening to each other, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that process of listening and performing at the same time after we're done. So here's how this is going to roll. Open up your wasted. Does everyone have this printed out? Do both of you have this printed out?
I must have dropped the ball. I'm a little taken aback by this. I didn't know. No, wait a minute. I checked just before I came on if there was anything else, and wasted hadn't been posted.
It's on the here. You know what? Here's what we'll do. I'll do a share. I'll do a screen share, and we'll just all read it from the screen together.
Okay, thank you. Sorry
Absolutely.
about this.
No worries. What this will inhibit, we won't be able to see each other perform, so we'll just have to do it ourselves, and trust that we're all sharing in the performance together. But let me do a screen share. Okay. I am screen sharing. All right. So here it is on the bottom, hiding on the very bottom.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. It's totally fine. I wish Thinkific made this a little bit more apparent. I should probably put this part in like bold or something next time just to make sure people see it. It's totally not a big deal at all. But here's what I'll do. I'll bring it up here. Oh, and we can still see each other in the corner.
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, wonderful. So since we're looking at it on screen, I won't make you stand up. I made everybody else stand up in the first class.
But I'm actually sitting in bed.
Oh yes, well, if you're sitting in bed, let's at least kind of sit up a little bit, because we do want to be able to use our bodies as much as we can, use our hands, use our voices. If we feel like it, slam a table, try to really get into the story in a way that you couldn't when you were just reading in your head. So let's see, I'll be chorus number 1, Helen will be number 2, and Susan will be number 3. I'll also be our director. I'll get us started. You'll notice every so often there will be an all, and we'll try our best to all say something at the kind of the same time. We'll see how it goes. I imagine there will be giggles. If you get a little confused, you miss a line, we'll give you a little nudge. So don't worry about getting anything wrong. Let's just have as much fun with this as we can. Are you guys ready? Do you have any questions? All right. The sound swells to uncomfortably loud, maybe some white noise, then cuts out. These three, as well as being the characters, are also the chorus. When they are speaking the chorus lines, they are all and none of the characters. Any of them can speak any of the chorus lines. They should speak to the audience. They shouldn't be afraid of smiling at the audience or looking them dead in the eye. They should speak in their own accents and be aware of the meter beneath the words, in the way that you are aware of a beat when you dance to a song. These are not the characters yet, even though they are. They are also everyone that's ever felt how these characters feel. If we're being honest with you.
Actually honest, not just apparently honest.
Then we have to tell you we don't really have a clue what any of you are doing here.
We're not really sure what any of us are doing here.
Thing is,
we wish we had some kind of incredible truth to express.
We wish we knew the deeper meaning.
But we don't.
We don't have nothing to tell you that you don't already know, and we thought it was worth acknowledging that.
Fuck it. While we're speaking plainly, let's get it all out in the open.
We're not used to this kind of environment.
We're the people that feel awkward in theatres.
The people that don't laugh at the bits where everyone else laughs.
The people that never know what to say afterwards when everyone else is expressing their opinions.
We don't want to, don't move it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forget everybody's looking at my screen.
Oh, it's so funny. We don't want to stand here in front of you and pretend we can't see you.
We can see you.
You look lovely, and we're glad you're here.
We are.
We don't want to show you something impressive that makes you feel clever.
No.
We just want to show you something honest.
Something ours.
And we'll be happy if it makes you feel anything at all.
No big deal, but
At the same time,
everything we ever knew.
What this is home.
Deserted playgrounds, tramps singing on the street, bleeding gums outside the pub, takeaways and car exhausts, and bodies till you can't see bodies.
working shit jobs,
And trying to care about things you don't care about.
and saving up to buy things you hate yourself for wanting.
Home.
Home.
A city where nothing much happens except everything.
Where everyone is so entirely involved in their own
Nothing much.
that they forget about the everything happening elsewhere.
And the thing is, if we're being honest with you,
And that's all we want to be.
it's important that we tell you we have no idea what we're doing.
We need you to understand the history here.
See,
We were 13 once with our fists full of beer that we jacked from the offie.
we lived without fear
We looked up to our elders,
and awaited the days.
and we'd be looked up to by kids half our age.
The years passed,
We got wasted in raves and felt
Godlike.
held spliffs up in the dark of the party like
Fog lights,
we were children in a city of
dog fights and rock pipes,
surrounded by
deadbeats and lost types.
London belonged to
us.
Us. We smoked skunk on the bus.
Everything was ours.
We got thumped in the guts, but
Stood firm.
stood firm.
We were young and we trusted each other.
It was all romantic and real.
We was frantic and full of our feelings and laughing and squealing.
Holding our sides beneath the unfolding of skies in the evening.
But things happened.
Our eyes got,
Dimmer,
and our dreams got,
flattened.
We got older, didn't we? We got responsibilities.
Started seeing our defiance as arrogance and stupidity.
We used to be rebellious.
and angry.
And in it all together.
But time passed and we realized
Nothing.
Lasts.
forever.
So now we carry it within us. The fact we used to be
Eternal.
before the world caught up and we forgot what we was living for.
We became
The inmate.
The guard.
and the key that locked the prison door.
We used to skim the surface.
Till we sank and hit the river floor.
We realized
This is all there is.
There really isn't more.
Staring down the barrel.
of an empty bottle.
Asking it to give us
More.
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 Our hearts beating.
Slower than they used to. Stressing over bills to pay.
A million distractions just to fill the day.
Faces grayer than before. It's not our world no more.
It's someone else's.
We're less empathetic and more,
Selfish.
less independent and more.
Helpless.
Thing is, though,
We soldier on through the cityscape.
trying to carve out a niche for ourselves in our little ways.
Life's great.
Life's awful.
Repetitions and figure eights
We're living like our best days.
have already slipped away.
And honestly,
How can we rise up and take the reins back?
When all we really want to do is to kill our dreams and let our brains
Smack.
smack themselves out in the corner of a rave.
desperate for someone to help us, but convinced we can't be saved.
We got friends we've known since we were born, but we can't tell them what we're feeling.
We're alone with the city in all its dirty, heaving mess.
Where the children fight for breath and get old before their time.
Or die young enough to live forever, or lose their fucking minds.
And that's the perfect tragedy of London.
A city where the best of us lose our ability to function.
And the worst of us thrive.
And the rest of us stride on and on through
The mess,
the rust,
the flesh,
the lust,
the lies,
The breath,
the dust,
the skies we lift our heads to watch.
the pride,
the sex,
the blood,
the fried food,
the stress,
the way we hide from the truth that is inside.
we hold so tight to our disguise.
That we find ourselves alone when we're surrounded, divided by our tribe. Wonderful.
I love it.
Woo! Good
That
job,
made
y'all.
me think of that Adele song.
Tell
when
me
we
about
were
it.
young.
Oh, yes. I did not make that.
Only the first reference of London, I immediately thought of Adele and her song written about how she and her friends used to hang out in London, but they were growing up and they were leaving that time in their lives, and she was nostalgic, and would they ever get it back again?
Yeah. Yeah. How much of this is really about nostalgia, looking backward for a time before when things were different? What was different in the time before?
Well, the line, we can rise up and take the rain. Oh, but that was about aging. So when they were young, and I'm talking about this poem, Wasted, not the Adele song, they felt a sense of control and agency over their lives, and a kind of, fuck it, I don't care. I'm going to go out and live, and I'm going to do what I want, and life's great.
Yeah.
And then as they get older and their eyes fade, and I can't remember exactly all the lines, how can we rise up and take the reins back when all we really want to do is kill our dreams and let our brains smack themselves about in the corner of a rave?
Yeah.
I don't know what my interpretation is.
Spot on.
And there's also in that first, almost like the first section, there's a lot of lines that start with we.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turns to more the.
Oh, great observation, Helen.
Clever, clever.
I only heard it when we were talking. I was like, oh, there's a lot of we, and then it kind of disappears, almost trails off.
And
so
the
you feel
we at
that
the beginning, I think, is the older present we. We don't know what we're doing here. We don't know who you are, but we can see you, and look, fuck it, we're just going to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it's like we are, isn't it? It's more, this is us. There's a connection of a group, and then that kind of, you almost feel that loss of that group.
Yeah.
I mean, literally at the end, they talk about not being part of it, don't they?
Yes, absolutely. Let me see if I can.
So it's the divided from our tribe. So there's lots of we're. So you're thinking about, that's a group of people doing something together.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and we're less empathetic and more selfish. Again, the difference between the group and being alone. Mm-hmm. The dyadic and the monadic.
Brilliant. And Helen, I never would have considered the fact that the we fractures toward the end into things, into dust, into skies, into beautiful things, into terrible things, fried food and stress, but also, there's the flesh, the lust, the sex, like there's so much going on that is out there in the world that the we is fracturing, that these things are kind of taking place of that connection. If you read the piece in Arthur Frank about the mirroring body, I think that would be an example of this, that's defined by consumption, The mirroring body is defined by the things it can use to fill the lack, the need, and it's a desire that never stops, just has to consume all the time. And I think these things are examples of those desires that can't be filled. And what a brilliant observation that the final we finds itself alone, even though they're surrounded, divided from the tribe. I love it. So as you were performing this, where did you feel the story in your body?
I think I felt it in my chest, probably because I can feel the vibration from my voice.
Oh yeah, nice.
In a very subtle way.
What did it feel like?
And I wasn't able to watch you guys because I was trying to watch the script. So and you're absolutely right. Sitting down, I didn't use my body. I didn't embody my body. I didn't let the words and the characters embody my body the way I would have if I'd been standing.
It's a different standing in a strange way gives people permission to like go all out and like bang on things. And like I found myself as I'm sitting getting a little more comfortable, you know, as time's going on, I'm just like reading back here. So it's a good thing for me to notice too, as I'm listening to somebody, to listen alert, to listen, you know, erect and ready and, you know, moving and dynamic too.
It was almost like that in the side of your vision. You could see like I kind of felt like I was leaning more in as and I think it was a little bit of, you know, connection, and because we were doing this together, so there was more that sort of, I could feel that was kind of coming into me rather than the actual words. And then there were some lines that I think maybe some of my lines that I liked when I read it through, I sort of felt like I wanted to perform them rather than just read them. So it was kind of interesting. And I did notice, Julie, you like I you know, the when you came back and relaxed in, and there was almost this, you know, I was thinking about the, you know, the times when you had that carefree almost youth that we were talking about. It made me kind of think on that. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm going to add that to our list, Helen. Leaning in, our list of things that we can do in a healthcare practice to really embody listening. Leaning in.
You mean physically?
That. Physically.
Yeah. You don't mean, we say that and I immediately think of that book written by the former CEO of Facebook, was it? About how women need to lean into their professional lives? You mean physically lean in?
In both senses, but I don't know many women who don't lean into their professional life. But maybe I'm biased toward women in that way. But yeah, in both ways, figuratively and literally, to lean in. You know, I think both work.
But I think that's leaning in as in putting yourself forwards.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably where there's a lot of women that don't.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Push, yeah.
Oh.
So I think that that's how I read it. As in the,
got it.
Yes, yeah. Look, this is me. Lean in, be active.
I understand now. Thank you for that.
Rather than that, oh, I'll sit here and.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Thank you for that clarification. I was thinking in other terms of like just, you know, kind of letting, you know, work pass by and not, you know, like I know most of the women I've noticed lately that a lot of the women I know are really leveling up their professional lives and in super powerful ways, even since the pandemic, where I've heard a lot in the news that, you know, a lot of women are being displaced from work, but I know a lot are just like, so I'm just proud. I'm proud of my ladies. So all right, next, let's talk just for, I know we're already 12 minutes over and we still have to do our reflective writing activity. So I promise this is the last question and then we'll wrap up really quickly. How does this exercise, either the content of the play or your embodied performance of the play, how does all this resonate with a healthcare practice?
Well, this poem is so much about a bodied experience.
Mm.
The sex, the blood, the fried food, the stress, the dust, the lies, the lust, the flesh, the rest, the mess. I read it backwards there, but it's such a corporal experience of life. It's so on the street. There's nothing, although that last line, we hold so tight to our disguise, but even a disguise can be a bodily disguise. But where I was going to go with that is it's not a refined, I don't know what I'm trying to say. There's something just really sort of base and human about it.
Yeah.
Mm.
I don't know that I'm finding quite the right words for what I'm.
There's a rawness
Yes.
to
Yeah.
it, isn't it? There's that. This is it. No frills, no fuss. There's a truth, I guess, that's not prettied up, or you know. I don't feel like we're having to, even though there are layers, you're not having to dig past a superficial performance. I guess there is. This is it.
So I could not imagine a better segue into our reflective writing activity, which is all about truths that aren't prettied up, dropping disguises, dropping superficiality. So you guys, you teed me up for that one. Our reflective writing exercise, go ahead and pull out a piece of paper and a pen. We're only going to write for 2, maybe 3 minutes. This is a short activity. If we need more time, I'm happy we can take as long as we need, but I don't think you're going to need longer than 2 or 3 minutes. So our reflective writing exercise is, both Wasted and End Times address the masks and the disguises we wear. Imagine you are a member of the chorus in Wasted, and you return at the end of the play after dropping the disguise. What do you have to say? Or what advice do you have for the audience? Let me repeat that one more time. What do you have to say about dropping the disguise? Or what advice do you have for the audience? Write 2 lines, only 2 lines from the perspective of a single chorus member. These lines can be rhyming if you want them to be, or they can just be 2 random lines. Do you guys want me to repeat any of that? We got it?
Got it.
Okay, I'm going to start our timer. Set timer for 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes and counting.
All right, next few seconds, we'll wrap up. All right, everybody done? Feeling good? Okay. So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to stop our share so we can see each other. All right. So we are going to read one line of the poem at a time. So we'll just be the same numbers as we were chorus members, so it's not hard to remember. I'll be 1, Helen will be 2, Susan will be 3. And we'll each read one line, and then we'll cycle back again, and I'll read my second line, Helen will read her second line, Susan will read her second line. And we'll weave the poem together. When this poem's done, we're going to add it to this morning's poem, and we'll have one collected woven poem at the end. Cool?
Cool.
All right. I'll get us started. Oh, there it is. Here I am, unprettied and raw.
I've placed the peacock down, but I do love her colours. Maybe I'll hold on to some of them.
Drop down into yourself, girl.
Look me in the eyes and help me carry the fire.
Take what you want, need right now for later. It's all here, but you can always come back.
Connect with your roots, that raw, real base.
Yeah. I love that we started with raw and ended with raw too. It was like it was planned. Brilliant. I love it. This is going to be a perfect addition to our group poem. I know I've kept you guys way over time. I don't know what time it is there, but I don't want to keep you from your families or your work any longer. Before we leave, I just have one quick question. What is it like meeting now in this embodied way after writing to each other for 9 weeks? What's different for you?
It's so nice to get a fuller sense of everybody. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, Julia, we know because we see you in the videos, and Helen, you were in the first podcast. So I already had a little bit of a sense of who you are. I think it was Daniel who said when he participated in the podcast, how nice it was to see people. Yeah. And before that, I found myself, I mean, I didn't mean to, but I found myself creating a profile in my head. There was the little intro bios that we gave, so I guess we knew where we lived and what profession we did, although I couldn't keep it all straight. But I found myself sort of creating profiles, and this just fleshes it out tenfold, but in a real way rather than an imaginary way, and perhaps a wrong way.
Love it. That's great.
Yeah, it always makes me want to go back and read all our comments, because then the comments have a person behind them, and you know, I start as soon as I see the podcast. I think it was Anna's that it really changed how I read her words, because suddenly I had a voice, and it was probably just probably the connection with the accent. I was reading in that just different way. It always amazes me.
Me too. I've had such a pleasure in getting to know everybody just through the podcast. So I feel like I kind of cheated because I get to develop these relationships sporadically throughout the course. But then getting to do the 9 a.m. call this morning and this call with you guys, it really feels full circle, like we've come together as a group. And it makes me wonder, like, would we have gotten to this level of depth, of intimacy, had we not had that space for writing in the first place? I've always wondered what the difference would be like had we met each other from the beginning, and then we write for 9 weeks, what the difference would be. And I think there are pros and cons to both, but I'm just glad to finally get to hang out with you guys in person.
If you've done, that's quite interesting, because I think I like it this way, because I think if you'd have done it before, you've got more bias. You've got
I agree.
You know, you're, because when you meet someone, I think, Susan, you said you kind of fill in all these gaps and you create a person, whereas when you're creating that person to start with, you're really just doing it with the words they've written.
Really?
So it's more pure of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, literally you are listening to their words rather than, oh, their hair's like this, or, you know, he or she looks this way, or, you know, you've got all those kind of
Yes.
preconceived ideas that come in. Whereas now, because we already feel like we know each other, because we've listened to each other's words, there's that comfortableness that, even though, yes, I'm now starting to get to know you as a, you know, person in how you look and how you talk and how like that, there's almost this, but it's okay because I know you, because I've read your words, and I've, you know, it would be so different if it was the other way around.
I agree with you. I agree. Oh, go ahead.
I agree with you, and I think for what we've been doing, I agree with you. It's been nice to meet each other at the end, but I can't help but think what I said about the end times, and if how if I had just read the poem, it would not have had nearly the multidimensionality to me that it had. Hearing the artist in their own words, with their own accent, with their own rhythm and emphasis, the way they intended it to be recited, spoken and heard and delivered, because they got to deliver their words. And I know we're talking about two totally different things.
Not at all.
I think that there is an intimacy that happens more quickly because of the space with just our words.
Yes. So you're making a great point here that there's not so much a purity of meaning when we just have words. It's just focused on one layer of that meaning. Whereas when we have embodied communication, we have multiple layers to process all at once, all of which cohere to create a meaning. And I also like the way that you point out that somehow the space creates the intimacy. And I agree with you. I've told people in narrative medicine classes things I've never told my husband, because I feel with that distance, there is a kind of, I feel safe to share things I wouldn't otherwise tell everyone who's in my daily life too. So there are definite pros and cons to both. So thank you for pointing that out as well.
It's the words that we write versus the words that we say, isn't it? I mean, there's that.
That
you know,
one
when you're
is
writing,
internal and one is
when
external.
You're writing, it's your own personal space that you're sharing with someone else. Whereas when we talk, we're already in that, connected to someone else.
And that's what I think. Sorry, Helen, I don't mean to keep cutting you off.
No, I was just thinking, like, words that are written are still within our space, whereas words that are spoken, it's a, you know, implied sharing. So maybe there's that filter.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting because one of the things that really bothers me about social media is you post stuff, but you don't know where it's going. You don't know where it's landing. You're just putting it out there into a black hole. Whereas when you speak to somebody, you know exactly who you're speaking to and the context in which you're speaking. And that feels more protected and safe.
And
that's all I was going to say.
And then you can also, police is the wrong word, safeguard your intentions through clarification. You know, looking at how people respond in an embodied way may inspire you to get clear about what you did or didn't mean. And that comes up a lot on the boards. The same social media problem exists on the discussion boards. We didn't have any issues like that this semester, but Helen knows we have in the past. And it really challenges us to get clear with words, and to try to be as clear as possible in our words to prevent misunderstanding. So it builds a muscle, you know, that we don't have to build because we do rely on visual cues and embodied cues. So I feel like I'm actually better at social media or just at written communication. I think I'm probably much better in writing than I am in speaking these days, because so much of my practice is done here on the discussion boards. So it is interesting that they're two very different modes of communicating. But it's good to strengthen the muscle that we don't really get to strengthen that often, which is focusing on the words too.
I think I hope you don't mind, because I do know it's late and you both want to go, but I think this notion of space is so interesting.
Yes.
We've talked about the personal space and the public space, but I've always thought of a relationship, any kind of relationship. A relationship is a space that opens up between you and another person. And the area of the space, but more the quality of the space, indicates the quality of the relationship. And, some people come at you too quickly, like they close the space in too quickly, and other people never let you create a closer space. And it's again about the space, and you're kind of dancing or navigating how you're both going to cohabitate this space that you've created and only exists between you.
This is bringing us all back to monadic and dyadic bodies and the spectrum between the two. I think Arthur Frank does a great job of kind of villainizing our monadic body without recognizing, just like in spaceship ethics, right? The real validity of needing that personal space just for self-care, something that is more sustainable than overlapping with the other at all times. And that's something that I don't think that he really spends enough time talking about here. So an excellent point for us to land on. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. What a great session. How lucky am I to have this intimate, small session with both of you.
How lucky are we to have you all to ourselves? It just worked out perfectly.
And I have to tell you, I am sorry that I have come and gone a little bit through the course, but I have enjoyed it so immensely. I have found it so nourishing and so thought-provoking. I loved starting each week with the academic reading, and I loved every academic reading. I found the practice of practicing the close reading and the close listening really helpful. I loved the opportunities for self-expression and self-exploration, and it was fascinating when people saw things that I wasn't even aware of. As you said, Julia, somebody else points out, somebody else sees maybe the shadow or something, or our lack, or something that we are not aware of. And so it's been just a tremendous experience. Thank you both very much. And to Lysanthi as well. I know you're the triumvirate.
Thank you so much. That just makes my heart feel so full. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been such a joy to have you in class. Even if you were honoring your bandwidth and couldn't be there the whole time, it was such a pleasure every time you were able to chime in. So what this looks like from here on out, we have one last assignment. It's just a quick little, we call it a final exam, but it's 3 very simple questions. You can write a sentence or you can write a novel, whatever you're feeling. And it's just an opportunity to self-reflect on your experiences in the course like you're doing right now. And then we have our post-course survey, and then we're done. Bridge is over. After that, I'm going to be sending you a free link to join this next month's Zoom call. We host monthly Zoom workshops. If you haven't attended one before, have you ever been, Susan?
I have. I attended your first or second one, a year and a half ago.
Oh my gosh.
Right at the start of the pandemic.
Come back again. We'd love to have you back. We have a really, we have like a little family now, like a group that just comes every single time. That's how Anna and Catherine actually found out about the course, because they were doing all the monthly workshops together. So they'll be there. And
great.
It's going to be November 13th. I will send out the correct dates and times. Jesus, I'm so sorry, you guys.
That's so funny.
When I sent out that wrong email and I got your notice, Helen, I was like, these guys must think I'm like smoking crack or something. Like, like clearly it's toward the end of the semester and my brain is fried. I'm so sorry about that. It won't happen again. I will get it right. I will send you guys the right date and time for the Zoom call that's coming up on November 13th. So I'd love to have you there.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Fabulous.
Good night. Good morning, Helen.
Everybody.
Good morning. Good night.
All right. See y'all soon.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.